You ever get fascinated by that? And then what about the two brothers that they just had a kind of a inexpensive bet or something on who could make the most on a house? You remember that deal? Yeah. So one of the guys made $600,000 on the house that he bought and fixed up and sold. I think he won $1,000 from this. And they're good. They're nice, clean cut and everything else. But I mean, when you look at how people spend their money, I didn't bring my phone in here, but if you want, I just looked at a house this past week, and it was 15,000 square feet. It has a gymnasium inside the house, and it has a swimming pool inside the house. It has 87 windows. It is beyond, and Carol and I know the guy that owns it real well. He used to play the bass in her cantatas. Unbelievable. So I jotted this down. There's what images of the good life are most appealing to you? Now, with a show of hands, how many of you want a much larger house that has all, you do? Only one hand. Okay. Sharon does. One more room. Okay. The program where they do those, you know, the couple, they live in, I think it's maybe Mississippi, Laurel, Mississippi. Now, that appeals to me because they're taking these old dumps in this town and they're transforming the town into, it's already a historical town, but they want it to go from hysterical, the way it looks and all broken down, and they want to fix up houses and get people to move back into that community of Laurel, Mississippi. Very, very little extravagance in the program. I like it because that's kind of the. By the way, you know this house I told you about? It's up on a sand dune. They can see Chicago, and it's in Beverly. It's in Long Beach, Indiana. Huh? Yeah, right. But I mean, the lake is just a panorama view. It's just incredible. Now, here's the interesting thing. I have every possibility of building this man's mother's house now. That's just kind of a regular house. You know, I like that kind of. I mean, I'm just thrilled that I might get a chance to do it. But everywhere you look out there, it's just beyond your wildest imagination. And I think people get caught up in that. So I took Carol out there and I said, hey, how would you like to live in that house? We'll go and see if we can buy it. And she said, well, who would clean it? You know, we're going to get into today too. We're going to look at covetousness. But I think the bulk of today's lesson probably will be with this other word that is the opposite of covetousness. It's contentment. And so here, a couple of questions. Is there anything in your life, what images of the good life are most appealing to you? Can you think of something that you would really like to possess? And so far, it's not attainable. A Ranger bass boat. Okay, all right. That's good. Hey, he's honest. Anybody else? What's that? Okay. Well, say that again. Okay. Now, how could we get it up those stairs? You know, Carol and I visited a friend from college, and she had a piano in her apartment. Her house was built. House was built in 1732. Now, when she got her piano, you know how she had to get it? She had to rent a crane, take out the front window, raise the piano up, and put it into the house. No other way to do it. So many of the stairs were like this to get up. Just incredible. All for a piano. So here's something that I covet. I covet loss of weight. And a buff. You know what a buff body is? We had somebody live with us, and we loved them immensely. And the wife would say many times, you know, my husband is buff. Huh, Keith? Yeah. And he was buff. I would like to be buff. Now, I have not the will to get there, nor do I have the muscles or the mental capacity to get there. So coveting that is futility. Am I right? Okay. Is there anything wrong with wanting to have money and material possessions, and then why or why not? Are possessions bad? No. I wrote this up. It's not what you have, but what you do with what you have. Just think about that. Okay. Now here's the transition, and this is where I'm going to slip Pastor in on this whole thing. The final commandment of the Ten Commandments forbids coveting the inordinate desire for what others have. Today we will see that followers of Jesus are called to reject covetousness and pursue contentment. Pastor said this, and he already confirmed that he read it. It wasn't an original thought. But covetousness affects many other things. Let me just, would you read for us that first scripture, Tim?
Exodus 20, verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
How many are in that list of things not to covet? 7. And they cover a big range. Okay, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's, they had to have donkeys and oxen to work, and they had to, but don't covet that. Don't covet his house, his servants. So the list was very inclusive. Now, here's what I want you to think about. This thing about covetous just is when you get in a car, you have to start it to go anywhere, right? Well, this covetousness is like putting the key in there and turning the thing. Let's take, for example, these people. David coveted Bathsheba, right? How many things happened after he coveted? Help me. Okay, that came even, but first thing that happened, what? He went and got her, right? He had the power to go and get her. Okay, what happened after that? Adultery, okay. What happened after that? He had to lie, right? He lied to he lied to the general first. I mean, just think of all the things because it started even before that. You know, he was living a lie before he ever observed Bathsheba. What was that lie? Anybody? The kings usually went to war in the spring of the year, right? He said, man, you know what? I'm tired. Basically, he was just lazy, didn't want to do what God wanted him to do. So he was full of deceit and lied. What else happened? Ron said murder, right? And then cover up. Just think about the coveting and what happened after that. It's just mind-boggling, isn't it? And I don't think there's anybody in this room that's going to fall into the pitfall that David did. But it's good for us to think about how we live our life so that we do not covet what is not intended for us. I'm going to try not be corny today, okay? I have something I could really be corny with right now, but I'm just checked in my spirit. I'm not going to do it. Let me ask you this. What about Cain? Cain did not get God's approval, right? He coveted God's approval, but then he got, I don't know. You might, maybe he brought produce, right? And he coveted the good produce better than the produce that he gave God. So that's where it all started. Now, pastors, I don't know for sure, but I, in my way of thinking, he coveted what Abel had, the relationship with God. And he said, well, you know what, if I can't have it, he can't either. I'm going to kill him, right? So, coveting led to, let's see, I jotted in, what about Joseph? Did he covet anything that turned into, coveted his father's approval, I think? But you know, I've read books with regard to, the reason I say I think he coveted that coat of many colors and the approval of his dad is because he was one of those kids, I believe, that went out of his way to make sure his dad saw good things that he did. Oh. No? Okay. Well, he's the boss. I mean, come on. So, but anyway, what happened? The brothers coveted the relationship with the father, right? So much that it turned into all kinds of bad things. But then in Exodus chapter 50, God said, you meant it for evil, I meant it for good. So he gets parked off into Egypt, right? And a famine comes. To me, it's kind of amazing how out of the sinful, stupid things we do, God can turn it around from one moment to the next. That's what? Full of. I asked Carol this morning, I said, you know, I only know how to teach one way. It's in the experiences that I've had with people in my life and my own experiences that I sit up here or any place that I teach, and I'm constantly telling about these things that have happened in my life that prove to me that God is in my life and he cares about me and he wants to do even more than I'll allow him to do. So these experiences, you're going to hear many of them today. And I think they point to, what about one last thing? This is New Testament. I just gave you all Old Testament. This is the reason I love the Old Testament. I love these stories. I mean, if they were good enough for Joseph and they were good enough for Cain and Abel, they're got to be good enough for me, don't they? And you? So don't be like some people say, oh, that's Old Testament. I believe in the New Testament as well. The final revelation of God Almighty. But I believe in the steps that he took to get to where the New Testament came into fruition in his Son and in people like Paul. What about Ananias and Sapphira? What happened there? Scary? Yeah. They coveted what was already theirs. Isn't that amazing? All they had to do was say, no, we don't want to give that much, and everybody would have been happy. But they lied about it. So, covetousness led to lying and their own death. I mean, have you ever made a decision that you were sorry you made because it had consequences that you got caught? Everybody. Huh? Come on. There's 3 hands in here? Come on. You know, have you ever been caught doing something that you knew was wrong? Could have been covetous, could have been most things, and then you were sorry about it. Oh my word. Okay. I love this honesty. Okay. Couple more questions in this area. In what ways can a healthy desire mishappen into inordinate desire? Let me give you one example just to get you thinking. And only eternity. And then I don't even think I'll find out in eternity. But when we built the school, we had a piece of property over here on where it is now. And we had half of the board that wanted to be in Portage. And we had another, not even half of the board, but we had people on the board that wanted it out. Do you know where Mallard's Landing is? Anybody know where that is? It's, if you go down 6 to 200 and turn right, there was a piece of property, and a couple of the guys, one of the guys was on the board, and a couple of guys just thought the school should be out there because it was like in between Valpo and Portage. Great place. The amount of effort that went into attempting to get the school there, and it was, I don't know if it was covetousness, I don't know, but it was a strong desire on those individuals. They spent $25,000 before we made the decision on the property just to design a septic system that would work. Unbelievable. Now, you know, when I get to heaven, you know what the Lord might say, you know what? You were so bullheaded, you were wrong. How would you like that one? Huh? I coveted it being in Portage. They coveted it being out there on 200. It wasn't it was a nice site, but anyway. Let's see if I can give. Oh, I have another example about a young guy that coveted success. This young guy was in my Sunday school class, not for a long period of time, and I'll never tell you his name, and hopefully you do not know it. But he worked in the mill. He had a real good job. And anybody that works in the mill, you can make a living there, right? Wally, can you make a living there? So, and he had a beautiful wife, and he had 2 little kids that were just really nice kids. And but he wasn't satisfied. So in the building business, you can get into construction in 3 areas with no skills. Drywall. If you have a strong back and you're willing to really work hard, you being a roofer. You can do the same. And so he chose drywall. And he was doing it part-time. And I kept saying, I would have breakfast with him. I kept saying, man, this is not the way you ought to go. You ought to stay right here. But he would buy equipment he didn't have the money for. And he would hire people and couldn't pay them. And you know what ended up? He coveted making a lot of money. You know what happened to him? Killed himself. One of the saddest things. And I had many opportunities to witness to him and to tell him about contentment and things in life. So these things can really go haywire in your life. And if you have somebody in your life that you see these things happening, pray that God will give you an opportunity to share with them that there's a better way to live. Do you believe that there could be even in the church, a coveting of things that are not in God's will? Could you, huh? Yeah, you know the only problem with churches? People. The best example I could, if you were to stay home and not come to Sunday school, you could turn the TV on and you could see people that say, man, the Lord wants you to be rich. And, huh? Yeah, I mean, there's many Reverend Ikes out there, believe me. And it flies in the face of how Jesus taught. And we're going to jump into this. Here, I jotted this down. Here's one last question. What cultural influences might deform our desire into something dishonoring to God and dangerous to our souls? I didn't answer the question, but I did say this. If our desires get our eyes off of God, we are in trouble. If our desires get our eyes off of God. The best examples, are you observers of who comes to church? You are, Pastor? Huh? Yeah. I said, man, I preached today and it was really a big crowd. Man, I'm feeling really good about it. Next week, man, I'm preaching. I worked harder because of all the people that came last week. And now this week, look at it. You can shoot a shotgun in there. There's nobody here. You know, there's good coveting. I think it's right that I covet you being here in Sunday school. I think that's a good thing. Now, if it goes to my head, it's bad. Same thing with Pastor as he preaches. I think that's hard. I think that's hard for us to do, not get, or to sometimes get our eyes off of God and on to things around us or people around us. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You know, even in the case of David and Bathsheba, she's a beautiful woman. David's a healthy man. I mean, he was really buff. You know, David killed them. Saul killed his thousands, David killed his 10,000s, right? Yeah, I would imagine David was pretty buff. But anyway, David, for him to have a glancing look, if it stopped there, so be it. Okay, Tim, you want to read the next one?
1 Timothy, verse 6, or chapter 6, verses 6 to 10. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
This is one of the questions that he asked, and it really sets the scene for what we want to convey. He says, contrast people consumed by covetousness and people living in contentment. I can tell you one of the people that I knew that had, I was always looking at him, wondering how he pulled off this contented life. His name is Rex Ludwig. Rex Ludwig, parents did not go to church. And at 16, in a youth Bible setting, he gave his heart to the Lord. Within a very short amount of time, you know these things where you have sister cities in other continents? They had he grew up, where was it? In Wichita, Kansas. And Wichita had as their sister city Curitiba, Brazil. And that seed was planted when he was like 16 or 17 year old. That city God put out in, and isn't it amazing how God uses these ordinary things in life to plant seeds that come to fruition? Well, anyway, he gave his heart to the Lord, and then when he got out of high school, he told his dad he wanted to go to Bethany Nazarene College. And his dad said, I'll pay for you to go to school any place but Bethany. That is one place I will not pay for your education. Now that's kind of a roadblock, isn't it? But in his heart, he said, that's the thing I need to do. And he went to Bethany, and while he was in Bethany, he met his wife, and her name was Edie. And they got to the place where they finished school, and they had a call. They had a call to mission work. And man, I'm going to have this story. Whatever I tell you, it's going to be good anyway. Whether it's 100% true or not. But anyway, he went to the Nazarene headquarters and said, my wife and I want to be on the mission field. And it was like, here's another door. We don't have anything for you. Because he wanted to go to Brazil. And so finally, after he kept going back and asking, they said, you know what, we might get you to another, what was that country? I don't know, it was another country, but it was down there. And he got to go and start his mission. But it was always in his heart, man, I've got to get to Brazil. And then finally, the doors opened for him to go to be with other missionaries who were already in the Kratzes. You remember that name? In fact, we had the boy Kratz here in our church at one time. Yeah. Huh? I think it was, but anyway. So, and he finally gets to go to Curitiba. And no church in Curitiba, no Nazarene church. Started meeting in their home. And then I saw the fruits of all their effort. And I'm going to get back to this guy who is content, okay? All he cared about was pleasing God. It's just incredible. We had him in our homes many times. It was like Jesus was there. I mean, the kids weren't arguing. It was just a peace in our house. It was an aura. Not that he was God, but he loved God, and he portrayed it. And he was content. He never had two nickels to rub together. But anyway, he built like 10 churches in Brazil. And the work there is, I got to go. And later here I'm going to say, one of the things that keeps me contented is my experiences on the mission field. It radically changed my thinking. And God got a hold of me one day in my devotions because I was debating whether or not to go on a mission trip. Didn't have the money. And I can't remember. I think it's Exodus. I don't know. It's chapter 50 of wherever it is. And it says this, enlarge your tents. And that was like God was saying, hey, I want you to go. I'm putting it right down there in Scripture. Enlarge your tents. And I've been on four mission trips. And every one of them have been good, except for one here in America. It was to the Navajo Indian Reservation. That was so depressing I could not. But I know we did good. But they are so far from God. And they still worship spirits. It's just, I won't stay there. Let's, so I ask you to contrast people consumed by covetousness and people living in contentment. I wrote this down. If you want to find out, and this is not new on my part, but if you want to know how people live and what's important to them, just look at their checkbook. See where they spend their money. Real easy. Go to their home. See if they got every trinket in the world. Go to their garage. See if it's so packed you can't even get the car in. Huh? Well, I know we can. I know we. I know. We had stored things in our attic for how many years? 20. And then we had the raccoons wanted to come and live in our attic, and they caused terrible things to happen. And after the raccoons came, you know what we did? We cleaned the attic out. 3 dumpsters. It was everything we didn't need. Just incredible. I look at my garage now. Oh, in the process, after the raccoons, then we had a house fire, and then we cleaned the house again. Hey, Bob, you're in business. You have anything extra in your garage? What's that? Yeah. Bob, do you have anything extra in your garage? Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You know, if we're not careful, we can accumulate and accumulate and accumulate and stuff that could be put to good use maybe for other people. If you, Carol and I periodically go through our closets and find things that we don't wear, and we get a small pickup for my stuff, and we get a big van for her stuff. Now, you know, we take it to the resale shop, and there are people that go in there and buy that stuff, that it's good for them, they need it, and they get it for pennies on the dollar. I don't even know who gets it, but I know I feel good because it's out. And it's not consuming me. So, I jotted this down. What effect might these different postures toward possessions have on their relationship with God and with others? You don't have to look at other people. Just look at yourself and answer that question. If you don't depend upon God and you depend upon self, how you live is going to be distorted. And I'm sure you have friends that you could point fingers at. But Carol continually reminds me, it's not my job to judge. But I can observe. When observation goes to judgment, it becomes wrong. I covet this. I love to tell the truth. Coveting goes bad in my life when I pronounce judgment on other people. That makes sense? And it's easy to do. In the same way that desire is not inherently evil, riches are not inherently evil. However, a fixation on acquiring wealth and material possession leaves us vulnerable to a multitude of temptations and traps that often result in ruin and destruction. Here's the question. Can we be content with what we have? And if you can, God is pleased. Let's go to the next. All right, well, let's see if I have one with it. How might a fixation on acquiring wealth and material possessions dull our spiritual awareness? If things become too important, would that dull your relationship with God? Would that cause you to maybe miss church or maybe miss your Bible study, your own devotions and things like that? I find this is, I'm not big on the internet. No, my wife would say, yeah, I am. I go scrolling through those things, and I get up, I have my bagel, I have my coffee, and then I'm opening that thing up and I'm starting to scroll these things and read. And you can't read this thing in just a 30 seconds. It takes 3 minutes, right? So pretty soon I look up, and 45 minutes of the time that I normally would spend with God and reading the Word and praying, it's gone. Am I the only one like that? The internet is good, but if it controls your life, it's not good. I would say if you want to covet something, covet your time with God. Guard it. Don't let anything get in the way of your time with God. And when He speaks, one of my things on my yellow pad, I write this down and I read it periodically. If God speaks, don't delay. If He speaks, be obedient right away. There's another thing that I've taught this too. Is delayed obedience at all? It's not the best way. It's not God's way. But Jonah is a good example. God wanted him to do something. He delayed. Finally, God got his attention and he did what God wanted. Would it have been better for him to respond to God in the first place? Wouldn't have had to be swallowed by the whale, would he? Wouldn't have to be spit up on the beach. I think it would have been better if he'd have obeyed right away. Yeah. You know, we say we would never get mixed up like that, but I can guarantee you there's not a person in this room that has not obeyed God immediately. It's human nature. Only one person ever walked on earth that made no mistakes. And you're not Jesus, and I'm not Jesus. So we have to guard against these things. Tim, you want to read the next one? What's the timing? Okay, we have a few minutes. Go ahead, Tim.
1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever.
Here are questions in this area. In what ways might we try to ride the fence, participating in the systems of the world that advocate the acquisition of stuff and the gaining of wealth, while at the same time claiming to love and be devoted to the way of God? Have you ever observed anybody that you in your mind think they ride the fence? You know anybody like that? You know, I mean, we're not asking you to tell who they are, but have you observed it where you think they try to ride the fence? Huh? Go ahead. So they're coveting the world at the same time. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying pastor, I'm not saying any preacher, but many times from the pulpit and from the Sunday school setting, we have told people over the years, just give your heart to Jesus and everything will be wonderful. It does not work that way. Jesus said, in this world, you'll have trouble. I don't want you, do you know what Jesus said too? He said, I don't want you to be concerned about this world. I want you to live here in preparation for what is going to be perfect. I jotted this down. It's not an easy task to live our lives by God's standards. It's easier just to live like the world does. Don't work hard, right? The world owes you a living. If somebody does work for you, don't pay them, right? I mean, that's the way the world operates. But for a Christian, they have standards that are given by God that are elevated. And they take effort. Do you know anybody that tries to just get by? Sure, we all do. Yeah. You know, here's another example, and you're never going to know who these people are that I'm telling you about, but because I've taught Sunday school, I've had a lot of people cross my paths. And just this past week, I'm going to give you the good story first. I had a guy that came into our class, and he was known in the community. And I'll tell you this guy's name, but I'm not going to tell you the other guy's name. This guy was a bank president of Portage National. Anybody, you remember John Lear? John, when I first knew him, was arrogant. as all get out. And he hated Christians. Now, why he hated Christians? If you went in to get a loan and you were a Christian, he'd find every way in the world not to give you the loan. Then something happened in his life. His last boy was born with all of his insides outside of his body. Yeah, intestine. Now that was a real wake-up call, right? How many of you have had that happen in your life? Huh? So anyway, I mean, John had some background. I think he has a brother even that is a pastor. I'm not positive. But John, that was a wake-up call. He got down on his knees and he told God 42 years ago, if he would save his son, he would serve him until the day he died. He reported to Carol, because Marianne, we just had the funeral for Marianne. He came to the funeral and he told Carol, he says, tell Dick, I'm at 42 years and I'm still faithful to God. I met with him and did Bible studies with him. I'll never forget it. Holiday Inn every Wednesday morning for I would say probably 2 years. He became my dear friend. And God turned him upside down. He coveted the world and the power. And God stripped it away from him. And now he covets a relationship with God. 42 years. I like that story. Do you? Let me tell you another story. Not so nice. Had a young guy in my Sunday school class, and he came into the class, and we had one of these services where the Holy Spirit was really working. And he went down to the altar and he prayed and got into our Sunday school, and he always would make this comment. He said, you know, I served the devil 100%. And now I'm going to serve God 200%. And over breakfast, many times, I would tell him, don't say those kind of things because they might come back to bite you. You can't do anything on your own. You've got to entrust yourself to God. I'll guarantee you he's not in the church. Now see the difference? One of my favorite verses is Micah 6:8. And it says this, what does God require of you? What does he require of you with regard to covetousness? What does he require of you with regard to relationship? Walk humbly with me. Don't have all the answers for your life. Get your answers from me. You know that to walk humbly, you know what that means? To be teachable by God. Time to... How can we encourage one another to take the long view instead of devoting ourselves and our energies to the empty pursuit of temporal desires? I jotted this down. Live so they will see life from God's perspective. Let me just tell you about my own life. I told you that it was very important when I went on a work and witness trip. Dramatically changed my life. When I got out of college and Carol and I came to Portage, all I could think about was becoming a millionaire. That was possessed me. And so the only way, the way I saw that it could happen is I got teamed up with some guys at Portage First, and they were in building. And so I began to look. I was saying, if I build a duplex here and I get it paid off, and then another duplex here, then something else here, pretty soon I had 4 buildings. And everything was, man, I was on my way to being a millionaire. And then 1978 happened. Interest rates went from 5, 6, 7 to 18. And every one of those properties that Carol and I had accumulated, we lost every one of them. But in the process, I gained a perspective on how I was supposed to live. I'll never regret not having these for what I have now. Don't covet what you don't need. Don't covet what is not to be yours. And don't covet power and whatever. You know what Nixon said? He said, power corrupts. Don't covet power. Perfect power, absolute power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Don't get caught up in that. Let's bow and pray. Lindy, would you pray for us? Thanks for being here.